All recording here. All right. Yeah, a few of you guys, man, thanks for all the comments. Everything's been really fun. I'm enjoying this. A few of you guys had asked if I could do maybe some amp EQ, like a little video of an amp EQ question answer kind of thing, and maybe go through the drive section of the pedal board. So I'm going to kind of quickly try to break some of that down. And a lot of this is trial and error. I've seen guys run their amps really, really quiet and been amazed at the sounds they get. And then I've seen guys run them really cranked and been like, man, that sounds amazing. So it's kind of something you're gonna have to mess around with and see if you get happy with either way. In the studio here, when I'm recording a song, I might have the amp really loud to get a certain sound without a gain pedal, or even with a gain pedal on top of it. But live, you don't really have the chance to do that. You have to set it in one spot and kind of be done for the whole night mostly. You don't really have a chance to run back and do any tricky amp settings. So I'll just kind of show you my basic kind of settings there and kind of what I'm doing, some philosophy behind that. And hopefully that'll kind of answer your question. We can continue to talk about this. I'm loving all the feedback, being able to share with you guys and talk to you guys about some of this stuff. It's really fun. And yeah, we'll just dive in. I'm going to try to do some close-up amp shots with my phone here and show you kind of like how I run the Matchless. I don't have my AC30 at the studio right now, but I can show you how I run my Matchless, which is a similar thing, and then kind of show you what I'm doing with some of my pedals real quick. So hopefully I can make this work. Okay, so this is my Matchless HC30 head. And as you can see here, I've got the master all the way down. My theory with this is that I like to keep the master all the way off, and it's a push-pull. So when you pull it, the master's engaged. And as a general rule, I don't like to use a master volume on an amp. I like to get the amp to sound the way I like it without using that. If you have to, it's a good cheat if you got to stay really quiet. Yeah, so there you go. The cut knob on this is it works in case you've never used an AC30 before. Instead of having like bass, treble, mids, or whatever like on a Fender amp, with like an AC30 style amp or with a Matchless, what you've got is this tone knob, or tone here, cut here. And so this would be the darkest. So that's rolling off as much top end as you're allowed to roll off in this amp. So I will usually start here, like with a telly, and it rolls off probably too much top end unless you're going for like a really specific sound. And then I'll just start inching it back like this until I hear the amp like kind of come alive, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's the top end. If you keep going, it opens up more and more top end. But for most things live, I like to just make sure it doesn't get too kind of ice picky. So I'll run it, pretty dark live. And then in the studio, it could be, who knows where. I think for these videos, I've been opening it up a little bit more, like maybe like that. But for live, I go dark and then I just inch it back until it opens up and I kind of leave it there. The tone knob is a click, like a click knob. So all the way up is full. It's as bassy as the amp can get, and then you start cutting bass. So in one of the previous videos, when I was talking about core tone, I said with my telly, I often leave it here, which seems like a happy spot for that telly. Just years ago, I started doing that. That's just kind of where I start. But I think in that last video, I actually had it all the way up for the B tuning video, because I was trying to get the telly to sound as fat as it could in the studio, just kind of like an experiment. But you can keep going. In the studio, a lot of times when I'm recording a track, you want to dump as much bass as you can for certain parts to get them to kind of sit in the mix. I'll go either all the way off or like here, I'll live, pretty in thin guitar territory. And it's funny, you grow up thinking, hey, I want my guitar to be as thick as possible and as fat as possible. And really you get in the studio and all that stuff has to be, all those frequencies have to be rolled off anyway. So over here, man, it could be anywhere. You can see my highest point marker here is kind of like, if I had to do just telly straight into the amp for big chords, it'd be pretty cranked. For these videos, I've been keeping it kind of quiet so I can manipulate with the pedals. A and B were just settings I had a while back ago. I was just doing some tone stuff up in the studio. And P, I think, was a song I was tracking here at the studio, and I liked the sounds I was getting, and I thought, man, if they need me to go back and recut some of this stuff, I'll have my settings. I don't use this channel. I'm almost always, 99% of the time, I'm plugged into this EF86 channel. And yeah, I run it, like I said, with no master. And this is kind of pretty quiet. Live, you know, I just, like I said, I start turning it up until the amp comes alive. This amp breaks up pretty quick, so you kind of have to be careful. If you run it too hot and you want to manipulate your stuff with a bunch of pedals, it sometimes doesn't work. So I live somewhere in, you know, it's usually louder than this. For these videos, I've been a little quieter. It's usually louder if I'm tracking up here. Live, it just depends. If I'm at church or in a smaller venue, I have to keep it down. And if we're in a big place, I can let it breathe a little, I will, as long as it doesn't get out of control. So there's kind of the basic idea behind the tone stuff here. This is really the key. You just have to listen. Don't look with your eyes here, because with your eyes, it looks like the amp's not on. But you have to start, you know, just start listening until the amp like comes alive. And if you go too far, you may lose control. So you just kind of have to find that happy spot. But man, I really like it cranked up here too. You can see that setting. I love that. So I use that a lot too. So it just kind of depends. But for live, I probably wouldn't run it this loud all night, because it might be a little too gainy. So I know that's a long explanation, but there's kind of the basic idea there. On the back, there's a high and low switch, and I keep it on the high switch because I don't want to cut the power to this. I keep it at the full 30-watt power. I want this thing to be loud and proud. All right, there you go. Okay, guts of the pedal board. I'm running into this volume pedal first that has a buffer in it, so that's kind of my first thing I hit. But for the drive section, which is what several of you had asked about, this is kind of always changing. At the moment, I say always changing. This has been a mainstay, and this has been here for 5 or 6 years, and this has been here for 5 or 6 years. This is sometimes a compressor, sometimes this is a boost pedal. I just kind of move stuff around. Because this is similar to this. You know, I don't always need all this, but lately I enjoyed the sound of this, even though it's really similar, and I just liked having it, so I was trying it in the studio for fun. Okay. And we recorded a TV thing for Good Friday that I ended up using this almost the whole night. It was really great. It's an Analog Man modded one. I think it's got the chip in here that they love, that's original to the old 80s Tube Screamers. Okay, so for a Tube Screamer, you know, you got to run this thing pretty hot to get it to work, because it doesn't have much output. Tone-wise, you know, I see guys running them like this, but that's if your amp's really bright, so it just kind of depends on how much top in you want to let through. I have to add a little top in. It's not really adding, it's just allowing it to come through. And then the drive I like about right there. So I'm kind of just living anywhere between here and here. Just kind of depends on the part that I'm working on. The RC booster I use for like a basic tone for a telly, like in the studio, just straight into the amp, like that B tuning episode I did. I was using just this, and I think I was leaving the bass here, and then I knocked a little treble off. Sometimes live, what this pedal's great for is you can boost your signal and even add a little dirt, but you can cut bass for like a lead thing. So I might kick this on with like a Les Paul, and this dumping some bass allows my notes to like really sit in the mix in the right way. So like a Tube Screamer, you can't dump bass. It naturally dumps bass, but you don't get to scoop it out. And then same with this. So like I'll stack this into, you know, this, and it kind of thins out my guitar for like a lead thing, which may sound counterintuitive to make it sound thinner, but it works in a live setting to get it to sit in the mix right. So this is a great EQ cheat. All night I'm messing with this. For certain parts, I might crank the treble on like this to get a Fano or Les Paul to cut through, like a darker guitar and a telly. I might add a little bass and cut a little treble. So great life hack here for EQing live. The full drive, this is a weird pedal in that the tone, you know, it's like I'll get the amp to sound good, and then I'll click this on. In order for it to sound like the amp, I have to have the tone cranked almost all the way up. For years, I ran it all the way up, and I still do that sometimes. Sometimes I just inch it back. You can see I've got a million settings on it. It's a mess. I got to come here and clean this up. T for telly. I was like, that was my setting for maybe my Les Paul, and then my telly was a little brighter, so I was inching it back. That's what that's about. A was for Angel Armies Live, I think. I was using that setting. This always gets knocked, so I've got it like taped in place kind of where I like it, where it hits the amp but isn't cranked all the way up. And then the boost I never run up here. It's just barely on, and it gives me a nice kind of saturated, thicker sound. Great for like kind of chugs and stuff. King of Tone, apologize for all the tape. This is great for, I put this after this pedal, after the full drive, after everything really, and it can just lift the volume so well. It's got a great lift to it, so I can get a lot of volume out of this. Tone controls, pretty basic, you know. I don't run anything too crazy here. This is the red side, the dirty like overdrive side. This is the boost side, the yellow side. What's great about this pedal is you can really crank the treble sometimes and it doesn't get too sharp. The EQ on these are amazing. The top end is really pleasant, so you don't have to like worry that it's going to get out of control. So there's the kind of basic idea for the drive section. And yeah, I hope that helps. That's kind of just some philosophy behind how I run that stuff. And I definitely will stack these live. So like if you covered this up, you know, this has been my main section for the last maybe 3 years of touring, is those 3 pedals. RC, full drive. So this would be like a good clean sound that doesn't have a lot of, you know, mid action. And then this would be like a main tube screamer sound. And then this would be like a good kind of in between and also a great lift for boost. I use that on top of, I'll add this yellow side on top of the full drive, or yellow on top of RC, or, you know, vice versa. These sound great together, of course, but I use them as their own units as well. All right, hope that helps. Okay, so hopefully that's a quick little rundown of some gain staging and some EQs. And as you know, several of you guys had questions about what those settings might look like. Thanks for the kind words about the tones and the sounds. I'm trying. I've never done this before with YouTube and video, and you know, it's all new to me. So I'm trying to, I know what I want it to sound like in my studio and when we play live, but getting it to translate on YouTube is a whole new thing. So I'm trying to figure this all out. But thanks for the kind words. I'm really enjoying it. So there's some ideas. Definitely hit me up with some more questions if you got other ideas, and we'll keep going on this. Thanks so much for watching.